The world begins to freeze again. You wake before dawn, not because you wish to, but because the cold insists. It seeps through the cracks in your walls, narrow slits between rough timbers stuffed with straw that has long since gone brittle. The air is thin and bitter, the kind that steals the breath from your chest before you even open your eyes. You roll over, pulling the coarse blanket tighter, but the frost has already settled on its surface. Your breath forms a soft cloud in the dimness. Somewhere outside, the wind hums, not loudly, but low, steady, and endless. It sounds like the world itself is sighing. When you finally sit up, the first thing you see is the faint light of embers dying in the hearth. The fire must have gone out hours ago. You reach for the iron poker and stir the ashes, praying to find a single coal still glowing underneath. There, a pulse of red. You blow gently, your lips trembling with cold. The ember flares, then dulls, then glows again, enough to catch a shred of dried moss. Smoke rises, sharp and thin, scratching at your nose. You add a splinter of wood, then another, watching the flame grow timidly, like a child afraid to stand. The room begins to shift from black to gray. Light filters through the stretched animal hide that serves as a window. You can't see the sun yet, but the day is coming, whether you're ready or not. You rub your hands together, rough, cracked, the skin split at the knuckles. There is no feeling in your fingertips. The smell of smoke clings to everything, your hair, your clothes, even the damp wool blanket that never quite dries. Behind you, something stirs. A soft cough, your wife, still half asleep beneath the pile of old cloaks and straw. You turn toward her, but she doesn't wake fully. The two children beside her are curled up together, faces buried under a piece of sackcloth. You can see their breath rising in faint wisps. They look peaceful, as if even the cold must treat them gently in their dreams. You move quietly. The floor is packed earth, hard as stone now. Each step feels like walking on frozen ground outside. In the corner, a small wooden table holds your meager tools, a knife, a cracked cup, a dull whetstone. Beside them, a single crust of bread wrapped in cloth, saved from yesterday. You touch it with your fingers. It's stiff. You hesitate, then break it in half, placing the smaller piece back under the cloth. The rest will have to do. You chew slowly. The bread is dry and sharp-edged, almost painful against your teeth. But the taste, coarse, sour, a trace of grain, is enough to remind you you're still alive. Outside, a rooster calls. Its cry is hoarse, brittle with frost. You pull on your boots, stiff leather that cracks when you bend it, and open the door. The cold greets you like an old enemy. For a moment, you stand there, breathing in the morning air. The world beyond your hut is white and quiet. Every roof glitters with frost. The field beyond is a pale blur of stubble and ice. The stream near the edge of the village has stopped moving, its surface trapped mid-flow. Even the smoke from the chimneys rises reluctantly, as if afraid to leave the warmth. You hear the faint sound of footsteps. Your neighbor, perhaps, already trudging toward the well. His figure is just a shape in the fog, shoulders hunched, a bundle of firewood on his back. The village is small, perhaps 20 homes, each one leaning slightly under the weight of its owners. Beyond them, a low ridge of forest stands dark and silent. That's where you'll go today. The woodpile beside your door is nearly gone, and there's no warmth without fire. You turn back into the hut one last time, kneel beside your wife. She's awake now, her eyes half open. Stay by the fire, you whisper. I'll bring wood before night. She nods, not speaking, her lips pale and dry. You wrap your cloak tight and step out again. The snow crunches underfoot, a thin, crisp layer that sings with every step. The air bites at your face, but your body begins to move on its own rhythm. One step, then another. The sound of your boots echoes faintly off the frozen ground. The path to the woods is a line of brown mud, frozen in place by hundreds of feet that have walked it before. Here and there, you see prints, goats, dogs, people, all turned to ice. You think of how this path will look in spring, soft, muddy, alive. But that is far away. For now, everything is asleep. You pass a field that once grew barley. It lies bare now, the stalks cut down months ago. A few crows pick at the ground, black specks against white. Their cries are sharp, cruel, the only sound that dares to interrupt the silence. When you reach the edge of the forest, you stop. It's darker here. The trees are tall, their trunks silvered with frost. Each branch is a sculpture of ice, glittering faintly in the dull morning light. You pull your axe from your shoulder and press your hand against the handle, wood worn smooth by years of use. You take your first swing. The crack of the axe shatters the silence like thunder. The tree trembles, snow falling from its branches in a shimmering veil. You pause, breath heaving, steam rising from your mouth. The air smells of pine and sap. You swing again, and soon your body warms. Sweat forms at your neck despite the cold. For a while, there's nothing but rhythm, the axe, your breath, the sound of wood splitting. When the tree finally falls, it does so with a deep sigh as if relieved to rest. You stand over it, panting, watching the mist swirl around your boots. The sound fades quickly, swallowed by the stillness. You begin to chop smaller pieces. Each one feels like a small victory. You think of the fire tonight, the faces of your children glowing red in its light. Hours pass. You lose count. The sun climbs but gives no warmth. By midday, the wind rises again. It whispers through the branches, carrying faint sounds from the village, a dog barking, a hammer striking, someone calling a name. You bundle what wood you can carry and tie it with rope. The weight bends your shoulders, but it's a familiar burden. You start back toward the village, leaving a trail of prints behind you. The light has changed. The sun, low and weak, glows through a sheet of gray. It feels less like day, more like a brief pause between nights. When you return home, your hands are numb, your beard crusted with frost. You drop the bundle near the door and kneel by the fire again. It's still burning faintly. Your wife looks up and smiles, a small, tired curve of the mouth that means everything. The children wake and shuffle closer to the warmth. You feed the fire piece by piece, watching the flames grow taller, stronger. The hut begins to glow in amber light. Outside, the world freezes again. Inside, you sit beside your family, listening to the wind. There's no feast, no wine, no song, only the soft crackle of wood and the slow return of feeling to your fingers. And in that moment, as you close your eyes, the cold doesn't seem so cruel. Not tonight, because for now the fire still burns. Work doesn't stop for winter. The morning fades into a dull stretch of gray, and the warmth from the fire begins to lose its grip. You've eaten what little there was, a heel of bread, a bit of broth warmed in the same pot that has seen more winters than you care to count. The taste of smoke lingers on your tongue. The air inside the hut feels thicker now, heavy with breath and ash. Outside, the light is flat and pale, not the kind that warms, but the kind that reminds you how far you are from spring. You step out again. The door groans on its wooden hinge, and the wind meets you immediately, sharp and unkind. It is another day in a season that feels endless. And like every day, there is work. The village has woken, though not fully. You see shapes moving through the fog, men wrapped in rough wool, women bent low under baskets. A dog trots past, thin and gray, nose buried in the snow for scraps. The sound of a blacksmith's hammer echoes faintly from the far end, but even that rhythm is slower in the cold. Your breath fogs the air as you walk toward the fields. The ground beneath your boots crunches, frost over frozen mud. In the summer, this path is alive with color and noise. Carts creaking, children shouting, the smell of wheat and sweat. Now, it's just a narrow scar across a dead landscape. You reach the field that once belonged to your father. The soil is iron now, locked tight by frost. You can't plow it, can't plant it, can barely recognize it as the same earth that fed you half the year. You kneel, break away a clump of frozen dirt, and it crumbles in your hand like old bread. For a moment, you just look around, at the pale sky, at the distant line of trees. at the smoke rising from chimneys. There's a strange quiet to it all, the kind that isn't peace, but exhaustion. You set down your bundle and begin your small work, the kind that keeps the body busy, even if it doesn't fill the stomach. You repair a section of the fence, hammering the wood with slow, deliberate strokes. Each blow rings out and disappears into the empty air. When you finish, you move to the shed at the edge of the field, a leaning frame of oak and mud that houses a plow, a broken wheel, a few tools too dull to use. You find your spade and take it to the stream nearby. The water there has frozen at the edges, but beneath the ice, it still moves sluggishly. You break a hole with the spade, watching the water swirl, dark and cold. You fill a bucket for the animals, though most of them will drink little in weather like this. On your way back, you see old Matthew from the next hut. He's carrying a bundle of straw on his back, face red and raw from the wind. You nod as you pass. He nods back, but neither of you speak. Words are wasted when the air steals your breath so quickly. He stops for a moment to cough, deep, heavy, like something caught in his chest. You think of how sickness spreads in winter, slow, quiet, like smoke through a room, but you keep walking. Everyone has their own struggle to carry. Back home, your wife is mending an old cloak by the hearth. The children sit nearby, tracing shapes in the dust with small fingers. You notice their cheeks are pale, their lips dry. You pretend not to see. It's easier that way. You set the bucket down. The water inside trembles, reflecting the flicker of the fire. "What did you find?" she asks softly. "Nothing," you say, though that isn't quite true. You found what every winter gives you, a reminder that the world doesn't care whether you survive it or not. The afternoon drags on. You take your axe again and move behind the hut, where a pile of old thatch waits to be cut into kindling. The rhythm returns, swing, crack, breathe, repeat. The motion warms you, but it's a temporary heat. You can feel the ache in your shoulders growing heavier, the kind of pain that doesn't leave, only hides. When you pause to rest, you look toward the forest line. A faint column of smoke rises there, perhaps someone else searching for warmth, or perhaps a signal that another home has burned. Fires start easily when wood is wet, and patience runs thin. The sun begins to fade before you even realize it was there. The light turns silver, then blue, then nothing at all. You hear the bells from the chapel again, slow, hollow tones that drift through the air like ghosts. They mark the hour, though you've long stopped counting. Bells don't measure time anymore, they measure entrance. You shoulder the wood and bring it inside. The hut smells of smoke and damp wool. The fire burns low, and your wife adds a handful of straw to coax it higher. The children lean close, their faces glowing in the light. For a moment, they look like little saints painted on church walls, still soft and real. You sit beside them, legs stretched toward the warmth. The ache in your back fades slowly, replaced by the dull comfort of stillness. Your wife hums, not a song exactly, more like the echo of one she half remembers. It fills the room gently, like a blanket being laid over the silence. Outside, the wind has changed direction. You can hear it scraping against the walls, searching for a way in. The roof creaks, the thatch shifting slightly, a whisper above your head. You close your eyes for a moment. You imagine the world beyond the door, the frozen fields, the animals huddled in their pens, the river sleeping under ice. Everything waiting, everything holding its breath. You think about tomorrow and how it will be the same hunger, the same cold, the same small victories. And somehow, that thought brings peace, because saneness means survival. Your wife reaches out and takes your hand. Her skin is cold, but the gesture is warm. "Tomorrow," she says softly. You nod. Tomorrow. The fire cracks. A piece of wood collapses into ash, sending up a brief spray of sparks that fade before they touch the roof. The children have fallen asleep now, heads resting against each other. The room is dim, painted gold by firelight. You lean back, letting your eyes close. The world outside continues. Wind, frost, darkness. but it no longer feels hostile. It just feels old. Older than you, older than your struggles, older than any kingdom or priest. And for now, it's enough. You're still here. You're still breathing. And the fire against all odds still burns. What peasants ate to stay alive? You wake to the smell of yesterday's fire clinging to the rafters, a thin ribbon of smoke that never quite leaves the house, even when the flames have died. It smells like winter, wood, ash, and the promise of warmth you have to earn again every morning. Your stomach is quiet at first, then speaks up, a reminder that hunger is a clock that never stops ticking, even when the sun is late and the fields are sleeping. You sit up slowly. The hearth is a shallow cave of gray, its moth-crusted with the memory of red. You stir it with the iron, find one coal with a pulse, and coax it back to life with breath and patience. There is no hurry in this work. The fire understands only rhythm. Straw, twig, splinter, stick, you feed it like a small animal. It answers with a cautious glow that warms your knuckles and returns feeling to the tips of your fingers. Your wife unwraps the bread from its linen shroud as if revealing a relic. It is yesterday's loaf, darker than you remember, heavier to a round of rye and barley with the faint sour edge of a life you feed, and it feeds you back. She lays it on the table and counts it with her eyes. Today, tomorrow, perhaps the next. All winter is a ledger kept in crusts and crumbs. You cut the loaf with the care you'd use to dress a wound. The knife is blunt, the crumb dense, it resists, and then yields with a soft, damp sigh. Steam does not rise. There is no steam in winter bread, only texture. You place a heel into your own palm, and a larger piece in hers. She breaks that piece again for the children, who hover at the edge of the table with their morning quiet, the kind that comes from sleeping next to cold and waking up next to hunger. You dip your portion into a small bowl of ale warmed on the hearthstone, an old trick against hard bread and hard mornings. The sweetness is faint, a ghost of last summer's grain. You let it soften in your mouth until it remembers how to be food. Ale in winter is not for celebration. It is for calories and cleanliness, a safer drink than water drawn shallow and icy, a balm for the throat that has carried smoke all night. The children ask for honey without asking, only with their eyes. There is none today, but you have salt, a pinch hidden in the crook of your palm. You dust it over their slices, and the bread brightens, a small miracle born of rocks and sea and distance you'll never cross. When the eating is done, if this can be called done, you plan the day's cooking aloud, not because anyone needs to hear it, but because saying the words turns hope into a task you can carry. Green and water for pottage, you say. Rinds, if the cobbler's wife will trade. Cabbage, if the well doesn't freeze. Your wife nods. She has already soaked a fist of oats in a pot of last night's broth, thin as memory. In winter, yesterday feeds today almost as often as fields feed the season. The pot hangs from a hook and sways when the door opens to let the wind in, a pendulum marking a time older than bells. You fetch the bag of grain from under the bed, where it has slept like a small animal. The bag is lighter than you want it to be, but not yet frightening. Your thumb disappears into it and comes up dusted with flour. You pour some into the pot with water, stir until the oats bloom and thicken. The spoon moves in circles, as if drawing you a halo. While it warms, your wife lays out what remains of the week's stores: 2 onions that have sprouted white whispers in the dark, a turnip with the stubborn strength of a stone, 3 cloves of garlic plucked from their papery skins like moons from clouds, a twist of dried thyme, a square of lard wrapped in wax cloth like treasure. These are not ingredients, they are decisions. You will not waste the thyme, you will spare the lard. You will save 1 onion for sickness. The children bring in a bucket of snow and watch it melt at the hearth's edge, fingers spread toward the shine. You slice the turnip thin so it pretends to be many, the knife clicking like a patient metronome. The onions weep into the pot and become something softer, something that forgives. When the thyme goes in just a breath, the air in the house changes from smoke to soup, from winter to waiting. You take a cup of the warm ale and pour some into the pot, careful to keep the hiss quiet. The smell deepens. Once so long ago, you had a bone to hang in such broth, and it lasted until even its name was boiled away. You decide not to remember that bone too hard. Memory is a fire that can cook or burn. By midday, the pottage is ready, but the day is not. You take your wooden bowl and sit by the door where the light is less shy. The stew enters you like a story told by someone patient. You do not eat fast. Fast belongs to summer. The children scrape their bowls clean and return the spoons with a hollow sound that hurts and comforts at once. Your wife licks the ladle when she thinks no one is looking. You pretend not to see. In winter, grace is the art of not noticing what mercy looks like. When the bowls are stacked and the pot is left to nurse itself by the fire, you turn to the bread again. The loaf must become 3 today, tomorrow, the next, and also more than 3. You must plant a little inside each meal so that appetite grows slower than the crumbs disappear. You slice for thin wedges and hide one behind the pot, warm, keeping it from becoming stone. Bread kept near the heart of the house lives a little longer, like a story told each night so the children do not forget their names. In the afternoon, you walk to the edge of the village where the common oven stands, a dome of mud and temper hard as anything you own. Its mouth is dark and black-lipped. Its insides inhale logs and exhale loaves. On baking days, the lane is a procession of women with baskets, aprons, and flower halos. Today is not a baking day, but you go anyway. The oven keeps heat in its bones long after the baking ends, and the keeper is a woman who knows how to measure charity without anyone seeing the scale. She lets you stand by the oven's warm flank under the pretense of checking the cracks. You run your palm over the baked clay, feeling the life still trapped there, and let it warm your wrist where the blood is closest. She does not look at you when she says, "The miller's wife burned a crust this morning. It will not keep." You do not look at her when you say, "How unfortunate." She wraps the burned crust in cloth and does not call it alms. You take it and do not call it debt. Language is a bridge you both cross without looking down. On your way back, you stop at the cooper's fence where nettles have made a brave green even through frost. He calls out from his shed, "Leave them to root." You laugh softly. "I'm not a thief." He laughs too. We are all thieves in winter, but God prefers the polite ones. You take the nettles patiently, pinching their throats so they cannot sting, and tie them in a bundle that smells like a promise of spring cooked down into something honest. Back home, the light has grown thin, almost like fabric someone has worn out with worry. You hand the burned crust to your wife. She treats it like a feast. The knife turns it into a rain of pieces. The pot turns it into a stew that tastes like more than itself. You add the nettles near the end, no longer stinging, now sweet. The children crowd the hearth as if drawn by cords you cannot see. You remember, without meaning to, the winter feast your mother spoke of when you were small, a day when neighbors gathered to make the season less long by pretending it had already passed. In those years, someone would unearth a carrot so big it felt like a pagan god, and someone else would find a cheese hidden in straw. And one person, there is always one, would pull a jar of honey from a shelf as if performing a miracle. For one night the village would glow with candles that had been saved for no other reason, and songs would rise that belonged nowhere but between hunger and hope. You tell that story now, not as a plan but as memory, and memory is a kind of seasoning you can add without measuring. The children ask if the feast will come this winter. You say that feasts have a way of finding houses where smoke is patient. Your wife meets your eyes, and you both know the truth. Feasts are made of what people hide for each other and share at the last minute, so it feels like magic. You do not know who has what. You only know that magic is often a map drawn after the journey. Night arrives with its slow sonorous steps. The wind practicing its old psalm against the thatch, the kitchen spoon knocking once against the pot, the dog in the lane thumping its tail in sleep. You ladle the stew into bowls and lay the bread beside it like a companion. The crust that burned carries a smoky crown. The nettles were the flavor of a field under thaw. Garlic rises like a blessing, someone whispered in the corner. You eat with your family the way you work with your hands, measured, grateful, believing. The first spoon tells you you have made the right choices. The second tells you there will not be enough. The third teaches you that enough is a door you can close with will. You close it. You save what remains in the bottom of the pot and say you are full. Your wife does the same. The children do not know how to lie for your sake yet, so you give one the last onion slice as if it slipped your spoon by accident, and you let the other drink the last warm swallow of ale as if ale were just a kind of tea. After, you prepare tomorrow as if it were a guest. You scrape the pot with a crust and tuck the scrapings into a smaller pot that becomes starter, the sour mother that will wake another loaf when the oven keeper's kindness aligns with the calendar and the village's turn. You cover the mother with cloth as if you were putting a child to bed. The dough you will make has not been born yet, but already you are feeding it. From a hook above the hearth you take a string of dried apples, leathery moons collected in a season that now feels like a hymn sung in a language you could once speak. You cut to pieces for the children. Their faces change at the first chew, surprise softening into joy. Fruit in winter tastes like memory you can swallow. You keep one slice back, a secret to be used on a day when hope forgets how to knock. When the bowls are washed with hot water and sand, and their wooden mouths shine again, you set tomorrow's tasks in a neat row in your mind. Visit the miller to beg for bran, patch the flour bag with thread borrowed from the seamstress. Ask the reeve if the manor kitchen has rind or bone, find the beekeeper and offer your help with hives that sleep, though bees owe you nothing in months without flowers. You will trade your back and your breath for anything that carries oil, salt, or sweetness. Winter is a market where pain is currency and patience is interest. Later, you draw a small circle of flour on the table with your fingertip and show the children how to make a cross at its center. Not church work, homework. We say grace with our hands. You tell them, so our mouths do not have to carry everything. Your wife smiles at that, tucks the small mother pot nearer the coals, and arranges the bread cloth so no draft finds it. She knows where the house is thin and thick. She has mapped its weather. Before bed, you open the door a crack to give the night proof that you still believe in it. Cold leans in like a curious animal. You listen to the village, a voice 2 houses down laughing, a cough 3 houses over, a baby's cry wrapped quickly in the hush of a breast. Somewhere far off, the church bell marks a number you do not need. You close the door and slide the wooden bar back into its cradle. This house is a boat that will float through dark hours because you have built it with care no one sees. You lie down last, as you often do, the hinge that keeps the day on its frame. Your stomach is not full, but it is no longer empty. Your hands smell of thyme and smoke. Your breath finds the slow tide that belongs to sleep. In the light from the coals you watch the shape of the pot on its hook, a silhouette that looks like a promise kept. You think of the oven keeper's burned bread, of nettles that forgot their sting, a veil that carried summer's sun across the month like a lantern. You whisper to the dark, not a prayer but a line you learned from hunger. We do not eat to be full, we eat to remember morning. The words settle into the straw above you, where tomorrow is already sharpening its frost. You close your eyes. The fire says good night in a language made of small pops and sighs. The house answers with a settling creak. Outside, the wind continues its inside bread ale, and hope keep their watch, 3 humble saints kneeling at the foot of your sleep, warming the air with their steady, ordinary miracle. When days blend together and hope becomes routine, the days no longer have names, only temperatures, only shades of gray. When you wake, it's to the same sound, the sigh of the wind pressing against the shutters like a ghost asking to be let in. You no longer check if it's morning. The color of the light doesn't matter. Morning and evening have become the same long breath drawn through frost. You rise because the fire has died again. You rise because the body, even when tired, remembers duty better than comfort. The embers are gone this time. You kneel on the cold earth and rebuild from nothing, splinters, bark, breath, patience. You feel older with each spark that fails. But at last, one catches, and for a heartbeat your face glows orange, proof that you still exist. The children don't stir. They've learned the art of sleeping through hunger. It's a skill inherited, not taught. Your wife is awake, sitting up with her shawl drawn close, mending something by touch rather than sight. You hear the faint rasp of needle through cloth. It's a rhythm steadier than the wind, older than the prayers that never quite reach heaven. You whisper, "How's the thread?" She answers, "Almost gone." You both know she's not only talking about the spool. Outside, the world is pale and sharp. Every step creaks. Every breath cuts. The sky itself seems frozen, the sun, a dull cone pressed against metal clouds. You move through the village, past doors that don't open anymore, roofs bowed under snow. A neighbor's dog lies curled by a doorway, ribs showing, its fur like smoke. It doesn't lift its head when you pass. You don't stop either. Mercy has a cost you can't afford. You go to the well, where the rope is stiff, and the bucket rim crusted with ice. The water below mirrors nothing, just black, endless, waiting. You lower the bucket slowly, listening for the hollow plunk when it breaks the skin. When you draw it up, your hands stick briefly to the iron handle. You curse under your breath, not from pain, but from fear that you might drop it and lose the day's water to darkness. The path to the woods feels longer now, though the distance hasn't changed. The snow hides your footprints before you've taken the next step. You wonder, not for the first time, if that's mercy or erasure. You reach the trees. The forest stands silent, holding its breath. No birds, no rustle. Even the river nearby sounds muffled, its voice trapped under a thin film of ice. You chop wood until your arms blur into motion. Each swing feels like a small rebellion, proof that something still listens when you demand warmth from the world. By midday, your breath hangs thick and your shoulders tremble. You tie the logs with frozen rope and turn back. The wind rises, throwing snow sideways. You bow your head and walk through it. The flakes sting your cheeks like small, white lies, cold promises of purity that only blind you. When you return, the hut feels smaller than ever. The air is a stew of breath, smoke, and damp wool. The children have found joy in something trivial, carving lines in the dirt floor with a stick, pretending it's a river or a road or anything that isn't this room. Their laughter is thin but bright, like light reflected off ice. You drop the wood beside the hearth. The sound is louder than you meant. Your wife looks up, smiles faintly. You brought enough. You nod. It's not enough, but it sounds kinder when she says it. She stirs the pot. The stew is thinner today, its scent faint, the taste more memory than meal. You eat anyway. You always do. Hunger teaches reverence. You chew as if the food might vanish if you disrespect it. When night falls, though it never truly rises, you light a single tallow candle. The flame bends in the draft, thin as a reed. Shadows climb the walls like weary travelers. The children sleep early. Your wife sits beside you, silent. You can hear her stomach growl softly, but she pretends it doesn't. You do the same. You whisper stories to fill the quiet. Not fairy tales, those are for better winters. You tell her of the time you were a boy, when the Lord's men came to count sheep, and you hid behind a tree, watching them curse the snow for hiding what they saw. She laughs softly, not because it's funny, but because it's something. Outside, the wind changes again. You can feel it, a deep shift, like the breath of something enormous turning in its sleep. You step out into the night. The Sioux glows faintly under a thin moon, blue and endless. The village lies still, roofs buried, chimneys smoking weakly. Somewhere, a door slams. Somewhere else, a baby cries and is hushed. You look up. The stars are few, but sharp. You wonder how many peasants before you have stood in this exact spot, wondering the same, not about heaven, but about tomorrow. and then faintly you hear it. Bells, far away from the chapel on the hill. The sound is slow, heavy, deliberate. 1 to 3. You count, not the hours, but the distance between them. Each tone drifts through the cold like a heartbeat stretched thin. When you return inside, the candle has nearly burned to its end. Your wife is asleep, her hand still resting on the mended cloth. You sit down, watching the flame gutter. The cold presses closer. You don't fight it anymore. You've learned that warmth isn't always fire. Sometimes it's memory, of bread shared, of laughter whispered, of the simple fact that you are not alone. The flame wavers once more, then steadies, small but stubborn. You whisper to it, half in jest, half in prayer. Stay a little longer, and for reasons beyond knowing. It does. Where faith holds a little heat, the fire cannot. The bell does not call you like a command. It drifts through the morning as if it were a thread laid across the air, and you take hold of it without thinking. The sound is muffled by snow, rounded by distance, softened by your own breath, but it is there, patient, even certain. One note after another, spaced like steps you can keep. You wrap your cloak tighter and leave the house before the children are fully awake. Your wife is already stirring the embers, whispering to the fire in that voice she uses with babies and bread. She nods when you touch the doorframe, a wordless go on. The latch is cold in your palm, a chip of winter's tooth. When you open the door, the world is the same as yesterday and still somehow new. Roof shouldered deep in white, the lane ribbed with frozen cart tracks. Smoke standing straight in the breathless air. The chapel sits on the low hill above the village like a stone someone placed there to remember a promise. The path up is stamped with footprints gone blue with frost, each one a small bowl of shadow. You follow them because that is what you do. Follow what others have worn down from stubbornness and need. Your breath keeps time with the bell, and when it stops, your feet know the rest of the way. The chapel door swells in winter. It answers you with a wooden groan when you push. Cold spills out, not in a rush, but like a guest stepping past you with quiet authority. Inside, the light is thin and white where it falls from the small, high window. You know the smell before you name it. Stone, tallow, damp wool, old ash, a catalogue of seasons pressed into a single room. The nave is narrow, the floor uneven. The benches are polished where hands have learned to slide across them, seeking a warmer place than the wood will give. You sit near the back where you can see and not be seen. Your bones notice the cold immediately. Your mind takes a little longer. It is a cleaner cold than the one in your house, a cold that keeps things rather than steals them. A handful of neighbors are already here. You know them all without truly knowing. The widow who always carries a scrap of blue ribbon. The cooper with thumbs like knots. The boy who stares at the rafters, as if reading a story written in beams. No one speaks. Winter has taught every mouth economy. The only voices belong to wax and leather and the faintest shift of cloth. The priest enters with the bell rope still coiled around his wrist. He is not grand, neither is his Latin, but he knows the weight of this room and how to lift it without breaking it. He lights the candles one by one, and each wick learns how to be flame again. The light does not warm you much, but it finds your face. You close your eyes and let the thin heat rest there like a hand. He begins not with a hymn but with silence, and the silence is not empty. It holds footsteps from yours that no longer exist, and those footsteps seem to hold you in return. When he finally speaks, you hear words the way you hear snow, distinct if you listen hard enough, soft if you don't. You choose soft. You are here to be held, not tested. It is the mass of a cold country in a hard year. The song is slow. The readings are short. The prayers are long because need is long. He names the sick and the hungry, the traveling and the trapped, the old woman whose fire went out and the child who has coughed all week. He names the weather as if it were a person who might relent if addressed gently. He names mercy as if it were bread put on a table where you can reach it. When the time comes to kneel, Your knees find the same grooves they always find, hollows carved by the stubborn weight of faith and fatigue. The stone is colder than a coin, but your body understands the exchange, a little ache for a little peace. You bow your head and try to think of nothing. Nothing is a hard thought. Instead, you think of the small flame at the front, the one that never goes out. And for the first time it occurs to you that perhaps it survives not because it is guarded, but because it is witnessed, like a story told aloud, like a room filled with breath. The priest lifts the host. The light thins. The winter presses its ear to the wall to listen. The bells in the little hand chime answer the bells on the hill, and for a moment the village has two hearts. When the bread is broken, the crack is delicate and final at once, a sound that admits both hunger and ending. You do not go forward to receive, not today. You are not sure why. Maybe it is enough to watch someone else be fed. After, the priest bids peace in a voice that understands how fragile the word can be. You offer your hand to the cooper, who grips too hard as if to prove he still can. The widow's palm is dry and papery, feather light. The boy at the rafters doesn't look down, but you see his lips form, and with your spirit like a secret he is keeping from himself. Slowly, the room loosens. The candles lean. The winter remembers its manners and waits outside. Someone coughs and someone answers with a nod. The widow takes a crust from her sleeve and leaves it under the bench as if for the church mouse. Everyone pretends not to see. The cooper lines up the hymnals by habit and hope. The priest unwinds the rope from his wrist and considers the end of it for a long moment, the way a man considers a field that will not give in until spring. You do not hurry to leave. The chapel offers no warmth you can carry home in your pockets, but it does something quieter. It takes the coal that always sits behind your ribs and moves it a little to the side, enough to make space for breath to travel without scraping. When you step back into the day, the sky has opened by a shade. The wind is less sharp. That might be weather. It might be worship. It does not matter which. The heel is gentle under your boots in the going down. The village shows itself in increments. Roofline smoke, the black stroke of a hedge, a dog lifting its head to watch and then deciding you are not a threat worth spending heat on. You find yourself turning toward the old almshouse at the lane's end, pulled by the same thread that pulled you up the hill. The door is narrow, the lintel low. Inside, the ear tastes of boiled wool and cabbage. An old woman sits by a brazier that has forgotten how to burn with confidence. She is mending nothing, just holding a needle because hands prefer tools to emptiness. When she looks up, her eyes are pale and exact. From the chapel, she asks. You nod. Did he say anything worth remembering? You think, he said the frost has a calendar, but Mercy doesn't. She smiles, and in that smile you see a girl who ran once without shoes through a summer lane. He's right when he forgets, she says. He forgets a lot. That's why we keep going back, to remind him how to speak like a man who is also hungry. You set your bundle down to sticks of good wood you did not mean to carry here, and a turnip that looks like a clenched fist. She pretends not to see them. You pretend to be looking for a draft with your hand. The brazier finds a little more courage. It lifts its smoke like a blessing it cannot keep. As you leave, she says, light your lamp early. The dusk will sneak up. She says it like weather and sacrament both. You thank her and step back into the afternoon that already tastes of evening. On the way home, you stop at the churchyard wall. The stones are not high, but they have learned to be old. So caps the markers like plain little hats. Names sleep under them with the calm of people who have stopped needing bread. You clear a patch with your glove where frost has turned the letters to myths. You read a name and let it belong to someone you loved once even if you did not. The act warms your face in a way breath alone cannot. Near the gate, the priest stands with his hands inside his sleeves, staring at the tree that never quite dies and never quite thrives. He looks up when you tap the frost from the ledge. Any sap, you ask, because you cannot ask about grace. Not yet, he says. because he cannot answer about grace. Then, after a moment, but roots work while branches sleep, he returns to the tree, you return to the lane. Between you, the snow keeps counsel. Back at the house, the children have built a cathedral from sticks on the floor. It leans as all cathedrals do. Your wife has balanced a pot lid so it shines like a wobbly moon above their altar. She catches your eye with the quick nod that means nothing broke while you were gone. You put the two good sticks by the hearth like a pair of modest saints. The turnip rolls once and comes to rest against the foot of the bench, willing to be soup if called. The afternoon thins. Winter triages light and decides you can spare some. You answer by tending what you can keep. The fire learns your name again. The pot remembers last night's flavors and agrees to multiply them with the smallest effort. The breadcloth holds its breath over the hue you saved. The house becomes a chapel of steam and smoke, and your children chant the liturgy of play in a language that needs no Latin. When dusk slips its narrow blade into the seam of the door and pries the room into shadow, you light the lamp. You do it early, as the old woman commanded, not because the day has ended, but because your eyes need something to argue against. The wick flares and settles. The flame finds the spoon, the floor, the faces you would find even without light. You speak grace without speaking it. May this be enough? Your wife answers without answering. It will be, if we call it. You eat. The turnip gives itself up with good manners. The broth wears the memory of garlic like a scarf. The bread becomes soft when kissed by the bowl's edge. You do not think of tomorrow while you chew. You let this mouthful be the only mouthful in the world. After, you take the lamp and go outside for wood you don't need yet. It is a ritual and nighttime procession of one. The light makes a small gold room around your steps. Snow takes the light and gives it back cleaner. In the lane you hear the chapel bell again, not because it is ringing, but because your hands remember how it felt to carry sound down a hill. Sometimes echoes travel inside bones longer than they travel through air. Across the way, the widow with the blue ribbon is shaking out a rug too thin to hold dust. She raises a hand. You raise the lamp in reply. For an instant you are both pieces of stained glass in a cathedral no one built. Your colors cut from hunger and patience. Your lead lines drawn by winter itself. Back inside, the children are asleep in a heap. They're breathing a tide that has promised to return. Your wife is darning the same pair of socks for the third time this week. When she lifts her head, the lamp turns her eyes into warm coins. You sit and listen to the many kinds of quiet the house can make: ember, wool, wood, skin. Before bed you kneel, not a prayer, simply the motion of placing your hands where others have placed them, on the rough floor that knows every bruise of every season. You think of the chapel's single unfailing flame, and you understand something you could not say until now. It does not live because it is sacred. It is sacred because it lives. You bank the fire. You pull the blankets high. The world outside removes its boots and walks in socks across the night. Far off, a fox writes its name in the snow and no one reads it. Closer in, the chapel keeps being a stone. The bell sleeps with one eye open. The old woman warms her hands on a brazier and a memory of summer. The priest dreams of a tree with roots that argue kindly with the frost and are winning. You close your eyes with the steadiness of someone who has learned the art of surviving in small, repeatable acts. If tomorrow brings the same bell, you will go. If it brings none, you will remember the weight of silence and carry that up the hill instead. In your last waking thought, you place a candle in the chapel of your chest, and it does what candles do. It asks nothing complicated of you. It simply burns. Where hunger becomes a season, and hope is baked from memory. You dream of warmth before you wake. A long table, candles steady, bread so soft it sighs when broken. The dream always begins with light, never taste. You never reach the first bite before morning pulls you back into breath and cold. The day begins with silence, then sound, a single crow, a shutter clapping once, the small groan of wood adjusting to the frost. You rise because your body knows before your mind it is time to keep living. Your wife is already at the hearth. She stares into the smoke as if reading it. A pot hangs over what might become a fire. You can tell by the way her shoulders slope that there is little to feed it. The small pile of wood is nearly gone. The last of the flour sits in a bowl no larger than your hand. What's left, you ask? Enough for a feast, she says, smiling in that way people do when they want to protect you from arithmetic. The word feast hangs in the air like a ghost proud to leave. Outside, the village smells of cold metal and wood smoke. The sun is a rumor. You see neighbors at their doors, each one pretending the others are better off. The cooper scrapes a barrel that will not sell until spring. The smith's forge is dark. The widow with the blue ribbon feeds a single chicken, murmuring secrets into its feathers. Life still moving, but carefully, as though walking across thin ice. At the well, the rope creaks like old bone. The water below reflects no sky, only depth. You draw what you can and glance toward the chapel on the hill. The door is shut, but you imagine the flame inside still breathing. The thought steadies your hands. On the way home, you find a boy by the roadside holding a bundle wrapped in cloth. His face is too pale, his fingers too thin. He looks at you without asking. You nod at the bundle. Wood, he says, though you can see it's straw. To trade, you have nothing to give. Still, you reach into your coat and pull out the small crust you kept for luck, a piece not large enough to save anyone, but large enough to remind them they exist. He takes it without thanks, which is the right way to take it. In hunger, gratitude is too expensive. He turns away, vanishing into the fog. For a moment you wonder if he was ever really there. When you return, the house is brighter, not from fire, but from the reflection of snow outside. The pot has begun to mutter. Your wife stirs something thin and brown. From where, you ask? The end of the barrel, she says. A little flour, a little water, the rest from memory. She laughs softly, and for a heartbeat you can imagine the taste of bread again, the way crust cracks between teeth, the way steam smells when it meets cold air. She sets a wooden spoon beside the pot. Try, she says. You do. It tastes of smoke and embers. Not bad, you lie. She knows. It will get better when we pretend it's for a feast. At dusk, you light the single candle and gather the children. The youngest asks, when is the feast, Papa? You tell him, tonight, because tonight is as close to hope as any night will ever be. You spread the rough tablecloth, frayed at the edges. The pot sits at the center, proud as a king's cauldron. Your wife sprinkles a pinch of salt, and it feels ceremonial, holy even. You take turns serving each bowl the same, each spoonful a blessing disguised as soup. Say grace, your wife murmurs. You begin not with words of scripture, but with the truth you know. Thank you for what returns, even when it leaves. Thank you for the warmth that hides inside small things. Thank you for the hunger that keeps us kind. The children echo the last line, unsure of what it means, but comforted by its rhythm. You eat slowly. The stew thickens as if grateful for attention. It is not a feast, but it behaves like one, stretching itself, pretending abundance. You watch your family chew with the reverence of monks at prayer. The candle burns low, and for once, the shadows seem kind. Outside, snow begins again. You can hear it whisper on the roof. The world, too, seems to eat, quietly, endlessly. Later, you step out into the cold. The village is wrapped in silver silence. You see small glows through shutters, candles, fires, breath. In each, a person pretending their soup is a feast, their crust a banquet, their hunger a song that will end with morning. You walk toward the chapel. The hill is slick, the path uncertain, but your feet find it by memory. The door gives way to darkness that smells of ash and wax. You light one small taper from the eternal flame and carry it to the altar. For a moment, the entire room is full of light, too humble to be divine, just human enough to matter. You kneel and whisper, if not feast, then faith. The flame trembles. as if understanding. When you return home, your wife is waiting by the dying fire. She has saved you the last spoonful of stew. It is cold, but it tastes of her hands and her courage. You finish it, then sit beside her. Maybe next year, you sigh. She nods. Maybe, but this year is still ours. You look around the small room, the sleeping children, the soft hum of coals, the candle stuttering against its wick, and realize she's right. The feast was never food. It was this, the effort to believe in tomorrow, even when today refuses. You take her hand. The silence between you grows warm, wide, and full, the kind of silence that can feed you if you let it. Outside, the snow deepens. Inside, your hearts do the same. And above the village, unseen in the dark, the bell begins to ring again, slow, steady, as if it too were praying for spring, where the first warmth returns as sound before it returns as heat. You do not notice spring by color, not at first. It arrives as a sound, a soft tapping somewhere under the day, like fingers testing a door that's been shut too long. You wake to it, unsure. The room looks the same, rafters blackened by smoke, a hearth still wearing last night's ash, blankets heavy with the breath of sleeping children. But there is a difference, small and insistent, as if the world has remembered a word it has not said in months. The sound again, drip. You sit up. A line of water trembles on the edge of the roof and lets go, striking the bucket you pushed under last week just in case. You wait. Another drop follows. Then another. A rhythm forms, uneven, humble, certain. You smile without meaning to. So, this is how winter ends, you think. Not with a shout, but with a patient conversation between ice and gravity. Your wife stirs. She listens too, eyes half closed. For a long moment, neither of you speaks. Then she says, "We should turn the bucket." Practical, gentle, like all real prayers. You rise and move through a air that has loosened by a fraction. It still holds a memory of the cold, a stubborn elder that refuses to cede the chair. But something younger has entered the room, a dampest that smells like iron and soil. At the door, you pause. Beneath the frost on the latch there is water. It greets your fingers, not warmly, but without teeth. You open the door to a sky the color of pewter softened with milk. The village sits under a thin glaze of pale silver. Everywhere edges bore roof ridges, fence rails, the shoulders of wood piles. The hard lines of winter soften, if only by the width of a breath. The path is slick. Your boots remember the cautious dance, heel ball toe. The well is dark as ever, but the wind that skins its mouth no longer stings. It speaks. You draw water and it rises willingly, without the grasping chill that used to bite your wrists. You drink. It tastes of flint and relief. On the way back, you stop without planning to, crouching beside a patch of mud near the lane. Mud, the poor man's miracle. Brown, honest, impossible to mistake. You touch it. It accepts your finger and leaves a mark, as if to say, "I am ready to be written on again." By mid-morning the village remembers how to sound like itself. Far off, the smith tries a test ring of the anvil, not the hard, winter slow knock, but a tone with a silver edge. A door bangs open and, for the first time in weeks, stays open. Someone laughs, a real laugh that isn't borrowed from a memory. A hen scratches near the cooper's fence and finds something worth tasting. You feel the sound of that discovery travel through the coop, the yard, your chest. At the wood's edge, the snow still surrenders in speech. The drip becomes a trickle, becomes a thread. A crow launches from a branch and leads it lighter by the weight of one doubt. Beneath you, the earth lets out a slow, secret sigh, a thaw so deep you hear it only with your souls. You follow a narrow runnel of water as it braids down the lane, collecting cousins, coaxing ice to change its mind. At a bend, it slips under a thin pane and emerges with a sound like a child swallowing giggles. You grin and listen longer than you need to. Water is telling you a story it has been forced to hold in its mouth for months. When you return home, steam blooms above the pot. It smells louder than yesterday, onion ray learning sweetness, nettles forgetting their sting. a shadow of garlic willing itself into spring. Your wife lifts the lid as if unveiling a season. The last of the turnip, she says. After today, roots will have to be found, not remembered. You eat slowly, letting the warmth sit in your cheeks. When the spoon scrapes the bottom, you do not mourn. The scrape itself is friendly now, a promise that more can be made with less pain. That hunger and hope will shake hands rather than wrestle. You go out to the field after, not to work, not yet, but to look. The ridge is still white where the wind has been stubborn, but at the hedgerow a small congregation of green is meeting without permission. Lamb's ear, violet leaf, and a brave blade of something that will be barley if the year forgives you. You kneel and lay your palm over it all, not touching, just covering. Like blessing children you are not allowed to wake. The ground gives under your knee. It is not generous yet, but it negotiates. You walk the perimeter, counting fences, stones, old promises. At the far corner, you find the tool you left before the first snow, the handle gray with neglect, the blade sleeping in the earth like a knife in bread. You pull it up, and the dirt lets go with a small laugh of mud. Welcome back, you say to no one and to everything. On the way home, you see the reeve walking the manor boundary with his stick. His breath no longer smokes like a forge. He nods to you and says, "We'll need hands for ditching." You nod back. Work said in future tense, another mercy. He adds, "The Lord means to mend the bridge." You almost say, "So do seasons." But you keep it in your pocket like a coin you want to spend when it will mean more. Afternoon brings a new surprise, a breeze with a top note you have not tasted since autumn. Rot, yes, but a live rot. Leaves that dreamed of soil all winter and are finally granted their wish. The wind chases smoke out of low houses and lets herbs come in, thyme from someone's pot, the ghost of rosemary, a memory of mint where the snow has thinned near a wall. The children quarrel over a stick. You do not scold. Quarrels are a sign of abundance, extra energy, extra voice. You send them to the chapel hill with a charge. Bring back news of the snow's retreat. They return rosy and solemn, as if entrusted with a state secret. The steps are wet, the eldest reports, and there is a puddle shaped like a fish. You accept this as prophecy. Thaw comes to the body as well. That ache at the base of your skull steps back a little. Your knuckles open with less persuasion. Your breath, even at rest, is less visible, as if the air has decided you do not need proof you are alive. You mend tools on the sill where the light lingers longest. The whetstone feels good under the blade, as if the sound it makes were sanding old worries. Your wife sits with you, unpicking a patch too poorly sewn in December's hurry. Thread behaves, cloth forgives. Outside, the lane fluidly rearranges itself, ruts into rivulets, ridges into streams, corners into corners with softer opinions. When the widow with the blue ribbon passes, she calls through the open door, "I found a root in the thatch." She holds up something halfway between a prayer and a carrot. It kept its sweetness. You cheer and she lifts her prize like a trophy. "I'm saving it," she says, "for when saving is no longer necessary." You understand and bow as if to a saint. At twilight, the chapel bell rings without command. One note, then another, as if the rope were pulling itself. You go because Thaw asked to be celebrated, and because your legs wish to remember the hill. The path is glass in places, soil in others. You choose your steps like a sentence you are writing without an eraser. Inside, the air is less brittle. Candles drive with less persuasion. The priest's hands are cracked but pink instead of gray. He smiles at the congregation as if recognizing faces rather than shapes. He says nothing grand. He only points to the eaves where drops fall with the patience of monks and says, "Listen." Everyone does. In that listening, the room becomes warmer than fire could make it. He reads a psalm about waters returning to their beds. You hear it twice, once from his mouth and once from the drip-laced silence. When he raises the cup, the light catches it and turns the wine into a small window. Through it you glimpse your own hands months from now, deep in soil, not begging, but guiding. During the sign of peace, you shake the cooper's hand. It is damp from honest work. The boy who studies rafters now studies the wet footprints leading down the aisle as if they were runes left by spring's own shoes. The widow presses the carrot into your palm when the priest is not looking. Guard it, she whispers, from hope that eats too quickly. You tuck it into your coat like contraband grace. Night lifts early, like a landlord in a good mood. You walk home under a sky that is less sure of its darkness. At your door you pause to listen again, to the gutter's new song, to the loose plank's music, to the soft thud of snow leaving the eaves in gentle surrender. The house breathes with you when you step in, as if relieved. Dinner is not larger, but it tastes louder. The broth has learned a new vowel. The bread has a margin you can spare, and you do, a small torn piece placed on the sill for whatever lies under it, and served you all winter without complaint. Your wife nods at the carrot without touching it. Tomorrow, she says, and in that word there is no desperation, only design. After, you bring in 2 logs without wearing your world to shreds. You bank the fire without apology, as if sleep were not a thief but a friend who will keep watch. The children invent a game called Rivers, and roads that involves rearranging cracks in the dirt with earnest fingers. You watch, understanding that they are architects of a country that exists first in the mind, Springland. Before bed, you open the door one last time. The air meets your face with a cool hand rather than a slap. Somewhere near the hedgerow, a frog attempts a sentence, fails, and rests, the bravest voice of the year so far. You answer aloud soon, and shut the door gently, as if not to wake something that needs the last hour of winter to be ready. You sleep more quickly and wake more slowly, another mercy. In the thin seam of awareness before morning, you hear a new sound inside the house, the soft clip of a drop landing in a basin you had the sense to place. You do not get up, you let the sound count for you. One more, and one more, and one more. A rosary of water beads clear as forgiveness. When morning fully arrives, the light has changed temperature, still pale, but with a hint of gold steeped in it. You open the door to a village mottled with maps, islands of snow, peninsulas of mud, archipelagos of last year's leaves revealed like old coin. The ditch along the lane has begun to carry itself, and the culvert sings in a simple round. You hum with it, surprised to remember harmony. Work returns in small, agreeable chores. You stand with the reeve in the cold sun and set where the ditch will be cleared first. You stand with the cooper and pass him nails while he convinces a staved barrel that it wants to be whole. You stand with the widow and let her talk about the carrot without deciding its future. Standing itself feels like a job that pays again. At midday you sit on the stoop and eat bread that has become, for the first time in months, a little softer just by being near the air. You share the smallest sliver with the dog who once lay like smoke and now sits like a question mark. He accepts it as if accepting a treaty. You stroke his head and tell him what you tell yourself. We'll have more, not all at once, but more. Your wife comes out with the washing, not much, but enough to argue with the line. Cloth lifts and settles in a wind that has remembered its manners. She smiles without looking at you. You answer without speaking. The domestic is holy. The small is where temples live. In the late afternoon, clouds part and the sun visits properly, low, wide, forgiving. Snow on the hill turns to a field of mirrors. Children run out to invent games that require only puddles and laughter. From the forest, a scent rises that has no word except thaw, equal parts moss, old bark, and the first arguing of roots with ice. You take the carrot from your coat and set it on the table. The children gasp as if you produced a phoenix egg. Your wife holds the knife the way a priest holds a relic. She slices it thin, thin again, then again. Orange moons that prove arithmetic can be kindness. Half go into the pot with barley and a pinch of the thyme you swore to save for spring. 2 thin coins go to each child on a plate by themselves, not as garnish but as event. 1 coin goes to your wife, 1 to you. The last 2 miraculous, impossible. She tucks in a small jar with a splash of ale and a story about next week. You chew your coin with care. It is not the sweetness that undoes you, but the sound, that living snap against your teeth, the syllable of a language you'd almost forgotten. Your eyes sting, and you do not hide it. The children cheer because carrots can make men cry, and that is a delight. The stew that follows is better than it has any right to be. The barley learns courage. The broth remembers generosity. The thyme confesses it has been practicing for this moment all winter long in its sleep. After, you wash bowls with water that no longer insults your wrists. The house takes on that soft end-of-day glow, amber through steam, soot turned to velvet in the lamplight, breath braided with laughter. You look at the hearth, and see not ashes but a map of evenings that will not injure you. When night comes, it does not arrive as an enemy, but as a witness. You bank the fire lightly, confident now that the cold will not use the window as a knife. The children's breathing is a lake without wind. Your wife's hand finds yours and does not need to hold tightly. You close your eyes and the last thing you hear is not wind or cracking wood or the gnawing hunger of a house. It is water choosing where to go next. Thaw is not spring. You know this. The fields will demand muscle. The sky will remember indignations and try to collect them in rain. Illness may yet circle back with wet feet, but thaw is a hinge that does not squeal when it swings. It is the world's way of saying again without promising easier. You breathe the word with your whole body, again, and sleep takes you like a hand finding a familiar doorknob in the dark. Outside along the hedge where the children reported their fish-shaped puddle, something green decides in the velvet hours to become more green. The chapel's candle burns without audience. The frog tries its sentence again and almost finishes. The ditch sings a little louder. Morning will come, and when it does, it will bring with it the smallest, surest miracle of all, mud on your boots, and a reason to leave the imprint, where the world remembers beauty before it remembers comfort. You wake to light that feels different, not brighter, not warmer, but wider. It fills the corners of the room without permission, finding places that winter forgot existed. The air smells faintly of wet wool and iron, but beneath that, something shy and new, the promise of green. Your wife is already at the door, leaning on the frame as if to steady herself against the strangeness of hope. She says nothing. She doesn't have to. Outside, the snow is gone. The ground is no longer white or brown. It's alive, an argument between both. Patches of grass make brave decorations among the mud, and the sky, pale as bread dough, stretches without flinching. You step outside, and the first thing you feel is softness. Not in the air, the air still bites a little, but in the earth itself. It gives beneath your boots a slow, yielding sigh that sounds like forgiveness. You bend down and touch the first flower of the year, a crocus, yellow as old gold, its petals trembling under the weight of dew. You whisper, "You fool," because blooming this early is a kind of bravery that borders on madness. And yet, you envy it. The village has changed overnight. Not its shape, the roof still lean, the smoke still curls, the same dogs still patrol the same corners. But its rhythm. Doors stay open longer. Children linger outside, pretending to play but really just standing in the sun like small worshippers. The blacksmith opens both shutters and hums while he works. Even the priest walks slower up the hill, his robe brushing puddles without complaint. You find yourself smiling at strangers, and they smile back. After months of silence, the exchange feels almost scandalous. At the well, the widow with the blue ribbon appears again, holding a basket that smells faintly of earth. "I planted the carrot tops," he says. "Something might listen." You nod as if she has spoken scripture. The cooper joins her. "Found my hammer," he says proudly, though the hammer looks rusted and ashamed. "Found my patience," she replies. They laugh, and for the first time, the sound doesn't echo, it settles, the way sunlight does on still water. You spend the morning mending fences. The wood, swollen from thaw, groans like an old man stretching. You dig new posts into the ground, and feel the soil's heartbeat against the spade. Every streak brings up the smell of something ancient and generous, long worm memory. A robin lands nearby, red chest puffed out like a boast. He hops, stares, then begins tugging at a worm that refuses surrender. You watch the contest with admiration. When the bird wins, you salute him. He doesn't notice. He's too busy surviving beautifully. By midday, sweat surprises you. It clings at your neck and under your arms, unfamiliar after so many frozen months. You sit, wipe your brow, and feel the strangeness of your own body rejoining the season. The light rests on your hands, brown-lined, strong, and for once, they look less like tools and more like proof. Your wife brings bread and the last of the pickled beets. You eat together on the fence line, saying nothing. A breeze drifts through, cool but not cruel, carrying a scent that stops you mid-bite, the unmistakable green tang of crushed leaves. You close your eyes. For a heartbeat, you're not a peasant, not a survivor, you're simply alive, part of something large enough to forgive you for being small. Later, you walk toward the fields beyond the chapel. The hill is slick with new growth. The chapel's door is open, and you can see the priest sweeping puddles from the floor, muttering about God's leaky roof. He waves a broom at you in mock threat. You wave back with your shovel. Both gestures are blessings disguised as jokes. Past the chapel, the world unfurls. The river that once froze solid now carries sky in its hands. Willows bend to see their own reflections, their fingers trembling with new leaves. Across the meadow, a cow bellows a sound so mundane it feels miraculous. You stop at the bank where ice once broke men's bones. Now it carries only foam and song. You crouch, scoop water, and drink. It's cold, but not sharp. A clean, honest cold that invites rather than punishes. Your reflection stares back, thinner, older, but alive. You nod to it like an old comrade. That evening, the village holds what no one dares call a celebration. Someone found honey that hadn't crystallized. Someone else unearthed a keg that still held ale. Children bring twigs of early buds, pretending they're flowers. A few fiddles emerge, dusty but intact. The air fills with small laughter, cautious but sincere, laughter that doesn't need reason, only release. The widow hums an old tune. The cooper taps his fingers against the barrel's rim. The priest even claps along, though badly. You dance once, awkwardly, because you've forgotten how to move without purpose. But when your wife takes your hand, your feet remember step, turn, step, laugh. The ground is uneven, the rhythm uncertain, but both forgive you. The song rises, and for a moment, the entire village breathes as one organism, lungs, hearts, voices synchronized by something older than hunger. A stray ember floats upward, catching light like a star. Someone cheers. Someone cries. And for the first time since the first snow, no one apologizes for joy. When the night ends, you walk home under a sky full of hesitant stars. The mud clings to your boots, fragrant alive. You pass the chapel, the candle still burns. The priest must have forgotten to snuff it, but you don't mind. You like the idea of light surviving by accident. At your door you pause. The air tastes different now, still cold, but layered with hints of moss, wood smoke, and thawed dreams. You glance back toward the village, where laughter still echoes faintly, and whisper, "Don't stop." You enter your home. The fire is low, but steady. Your wife hums softly while folding cloth. The children are asleep, cheeks pink with something that might finally be health. You sit beside her, and she says, "Tomorrow, I'll plant onions." You nod. "Tomorrow, I'll fix the roof." Both of you know neither task will be easy, but that's no longer the point. Spring isn't mercy, it's invitation. You reach for her hand and hold it as if to anchor this new warmth in place. Outside, the wind moves through the thatch like a choir remembering its song. Inside, the last of the coals glow, their red deepening to gold. For the first time in months, you do not pray before sleep. You simply trust, where spring turns into labor, and hope must be worked like soil. Morning starts before you do. A bird has found the precise string in the air that sounds like courage, and it plucks that note until your eyelids lift. Light pulls at the edges of the room, thin as milk, and the house smells of damp earth brought in on boots and thoughts. Your wife is tying her hair with a strip of linen already stained by seasons. She is thinking in rows. You can tell by the way her fingers move quick, sure, measuring distances no ruler could hold. There is bread, and you cut it without ceremony. The blade remembers its older job splitting kindling, so you guide it carefully and thank it anyway. A jug of water sweats on the table. You drink, and the world rises to meet you. Today is not a day to linger. Today is a day to wear your back like a tool. You step outside into a sky that has finally learned how to be blue without apology. The air is cool but loyal, the kind that keeps you honest rather than small. Across the lane, the cooper is already at his hoops. He salutes with a ring of iron. The widow with the blue ribbon is kneeling at her threshold, blessing seed with the quiet movements of a woman who trusts the grammar of small acts. The priest passes carrying a spade because prayer, too, has seasons. Your field waits, a page almost erased. Winter's hand has lifted but left its script, matted grass, scatterings of stick and stone, the pale bones of weeds. You lay your palm against the ground and speak its old name under your breath, the one your father used when he wanted the soil to listen. Home. The plow lives where you left it last year, half under a lean-to, half in memory. Wood dark with weather, ironed right where your hand keeps finding it. You oil what can be oiled, lash what must be lashed, and hitch the harness to the patient beast that has carried your hunger through more months than you dare count. The ox blows steam into air that no longer bites. You scratch between its horns. Slow as holy, you say, and it swings its head as if to agree. First furrow. The first pull is always a conversation. Soil speaks through the handles into your forearms, through your shoulders into your spine. You reply with breath, with weight, with that careful stubbornness winter taught you. The blade noses in, wavers, commits. Earth lifts and turns it dark. Damp page folded over to reveal its ink. There is a sound plowing makes no other work can imitate. A soft tearing, a velvet rip, a wet sigh. It rewrites you as you write the field. Behind you, a ribbon of black steps forward into the year, asking for seed. You mark the line with your eye and refuse to look back at how straight it is. Pride is a luxury for men with granaries. You care about depth, moisture, the little twitch in your wrist that means stone. When the blade strikes one, the shock jumps up your bones like lightning reconsidered. You halt. Pry. Lift. A river egg of granite rises to your palm like the skull of a thought you do not need. You throw it to the hedgerow, and the hedgerow says thank you the way hedgerows do, by making a place for birds. The second furrow follows the first the way a psalm follows a psalm, same tune. New mercy. The ox settles into its patience. You settle into your legs. The world narrows to the short horizon of the plow's time, then widens each time the blade turns the day over to reveal its damp sweet. By mid-morning, sweat finds your back and travels the long road down your spine. Your palms, newly tender after months of cold, begin to remember the tough language of handles. You pause to shift the harness. The ox leans into your chest like a door gently closing. Its breath carries hay and the idea of summer. You take a swallow of water warm from your pocket and taste tin, sun, and gratitude. 2. Seed and silence. Your wife arrives with a bag of barley seed against her hip. She has counted it with her fingertips the way you count ours, knowing that neither number matters as much as faith applied at the right depth. She walks the furrow behind you with the authority of a river learning its old course. Her fingers open and close, the seed falls, a brief patter, a thin rain, a birdless prayer. You watch your shadows behave, yours leaning forward, hers falling in small bright handfuls. The field learns to be many, one row asking, the next answering. You keep the blade true and speak to the earth in grunts that make sense only to soil. She does not talk much. Sewing is a work that prefers the quiet inside a body. When she does speak, it is to the bag the way a mother instructs a child who thinks it knows hunger. Little now, plenty later. The priest appears at the boundary and lifts his hand. He says nothing you can hear, then scratches a small cross in the loosened dirt with his boot. You nod, unwilling to break the silence that holds the field like a bowl. He nods back and is gone, leaving boot prints that look like notes on a staff you cannot read. At the far corner, the widow plants onion sets with swift, kind thumb strokes. She whistles a tune with no words and every promise. The cooper hums harmony without meaning to. The village's breath becomes music you do not need ears to hear. It enters through your skin. 3. The old math. You stop when the sun says stop, not when your body asks. She makes a chapel of the hedgerow. You kneel in it with your lunch. Bread looks less like survival now, and more like part of a sentence that has begun to make sense. Your wife passes you a sliver of cheese so small it must be belief. The ox tears grass in the shape of patience. A robin, owning the entire field with its chest, comes too close. You pay tax in crumbs and do not resent the crown. You talk over the long math of the year, how many rows, how many days until the barley shows a sheen, how many mugs of ale a good yield could become, how many loaves, how many bowls. The numbers are not precise, but their music is kind. You draw small plans in the dirt with a stick ditch here, beans there, a fence mended, a gate moved. Your wife edits with a toe. You concede. She's usually right where edges are concerned. The wind moves and the field flickers 1,000 mirrors catching a sky not yet blue enough to bother. You close your eyes and feel that flicker behind your ribs. The first itch of hope, not the fireworks kind, the root kind. 4. Work that remembers you. Afternoon stretches your shadow until it becomes a teacher pointing west. You rise, set the blade, and return to your sentence. Work keeps your thoughts from wandering into futures you cannot afford. But work also breeds a thought you can afford. This row, then the next. You could live an entire life on that grammar. A boy from the manor pauses at the field edge, mouth green with something early and edible. He watches you as if watching a story old as the world and new as the ache in your back. Does it hurt? He asks finally. Yes, you say. He considers this. Will it be worth it? Yes, you say again, and feel the truth arrive not as a trumpet but as a shoulder loosening. He nods once solemn, and runs on to wherever boys go when running is exactly the right theology. You hit a seam of clay that makes the blade's song go low and hard. The plow shudders. The ox plants its feet. You lean into the handles, and the handles lean into you, and together you persuade the year to break open. When it does, the smell that rises is cathedral old stone and candlewick, loam and lost ring. You breathe it like sacrament, slow enough to be changed. The edges and errands. Late day, the field holds your work like a quilt laid flat for inspection. Rows dark and straight enough to please a kind man, crooked enough to belong to real hunger. You walk the edges with a sack for stones and a mind for favors owed. You will trade this sack to the mason for a repair to your threshold. You will trade a morning in the manor ditch for a handful of split laths. The economy of winter becomes the diplomacy of spring. At the far hedge you find the old rabbit run, a tunnel as neat as a thought you should not have. You mark it with a stick and make a note to set a snare only if the larder argues convincingly. Mercy and appetite hold a conversation no one wins. You leave them to it. Back by the gate, the widow holds up a sprout as if it were a tiny flag. Look, she says, we have green. You kneel and see not much to leaves shaped like part of a tear, but when you place your hand near it, the earth seems to come up to meet your palm. They're brave this year, she says. You answer, or we are. B.I. The small liturgies. Home is another field in need of straight lines. You unbuckle leather, rub the ox's shoulder until your thumb shines. Speak thanks into fur. You hang iron where it will not rust faster than it needs to. You wash your hands in water that has warmed while you were not watching. The dirt lifts. and leaves behind the map of a life that fits your palms exactly. Inside, the table is a cream brown rectangle that wants bowls on it. The pot sings a low hymn. Barley thickens into the kind of patience that can be eaten. Your wife tears 2 leaves from the nettle bunch you put by the door and drops them in. A smell rises that belongs to no season but hunger's end. You say grace with your hands because your mouth is tired. Setting bowls is a prayer. Passing salt is a song. Filling cups with the air you coaxed from last year's dryness is a miracle sensible enough to live in. The children make boats of crust and float them across their bowls, and even this is a liturgy of practice in keeping something upright through waves. You eat. It is not winter eating, where every bite must argue with fear. It is not yet summer eating, where fullness is its own noise. It is the middle kind, quiet, efficient, grateful. You stop when you feel the precise hinge between enough and again. You have learned to close that door gracefully. 7. Prayer without words. After, you carry a bowl to the step and watch evening set its hand across the village. These memorize directions with furious decentio. A late gull scribbles the sky with a white sentence you cannot translate. The chapel bell rings once as if to check whether sound still travels. It does. You do not kneel. You do not need to. The field you made today is a prayer someone could walk inside. Still, you speak to the air, because air is generous. For what the blade found and did not break me, thank you. For what the ground withheld until I learned patience, thank you. For the stone I lifted because some roof needs it more than my furrow, thank you. For the rows that look forward even when I do not, thank you. The words do not go far. They do not need to. They settle in the hedge like small birds that will remember your voice. 8. A brief festival of tools. You tend to what tended you. The whetstone kisses metal, the oil sees itself in iron. You run linen through your hands until the fibers remember softness. Your wife unties her hair, and it falls like a field in wind. You smile and say nothing, because there are compliments that work best as breath. The cooper walks by, tapping a hoop into docility, and asks, "Rose true?" "True enough," you say. He nods. True enough keeps bread honest. Behind him, the widow calls, "I have chives if anyone has manners." You raise a hand and promise a trade of labor tomorrow. She grins, ribbon bright as a word you'll let the day end on. 9. Night sows its own seeds. You bank the fire, not to hoard, but to teach it the pace of night. The children sleep in the geometry of exhaustion, knees and elbows like punctuation in a paragraph that never grows dull. Your wife places the seed bag on the high shelf with the tenderness of a woman setting down a baby who has finally slept. You wrap your fingers around the ache in your forearms and call it good. In bed, the straw remembers harvest, wagon, loft, winter. You turn onto your side to listen for what the house knows, a mouse making treaties with the cat, the roof answering the last cool of the dark, the soft opinion of the door settling into its frame. Somewhere beyond the lane, a plowman like you coughs, and then laughs at something his wife said that you cannot hear but understand anyway. Before sleep claims you, a last thought arrives with its boots off. Tomorrow's just this again. You do not dread it. The rows will receive you as they did today. The blade will teach you the part of the saw you did not yet learn. Your hands will write the same sentence, and it will read as new because weather is an editor you respect. You exhale. The field exhales with you turning, down below, seed side up. The ox dreams of grass, and wakes briefly to bless it. And out in the dark, along the furrows, something small listens to the warmth your work left behind. It tenses, splits, and makes a tiny decision. No sound, no witness, only the purest grammar living things possess. Begin,